Dr. Sarah Chun pressed her back against the cold metal wall of the research station, her heart pounding as the lights flickered overhead. The emergency sirens had been blaring for the past 10 minutes, their shrill warning echoing through the corridors of Station Kepler 442b. Something had gone terribly wrong. She clutched the datapad containing her xenobiology research, 3 years of work studying the native life forms of this distant world. The planet was supposed to be safe, classified as a Class 2 research zone with minimal hostile fauna. That classification had just proven deadly wrong. Through the reinforced windows, Sarah could see them moving in the twilight forest beyond the station perimeter. The Kithara pack hunters stood nearly 3 meters tall on their powerful hind legs, their midnight black scales gleaming in the dying light. Their elongated skulls housed rows of crystalline teeth that could slice through standard armor plating. Each creature possessed 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws, and their yellow eyes glowed with predatory intelligence. The station's automated defenses had held them back for now, but Sarah knew it wouldn't last. The energy barriers were already showing stress fractures from the creatures' coordinated attacks. These weren't mindless beasts. They were using tactical formations, testing weak points, learning from each failed assault. Commander Torres's voice crackled over the intercom system, distorted by static and interference. All personnel, this is an immediate evacuation order. The Kithara have breached sectors 7 through 12. Proceed to emergency pods immediately. This is not a drill. Sarah grabbed her research pack and ran toward the evacuation zone, her boots echoing in the empty corridors. Most of the station's 40-person crew had already reached the pods, but she had stayed behind to secure her data. 3 years of studying this planet's ecosystem couldn't be lost, not when they were so close to understanding the complex predator-prey relationships that governed this world. As she rounded a corner, Sarah heard something that stopped her dead in her tracks. High-pitched cries, almost musical in their desperation, coming from the abandoned nursery section. The sound sent chills down her spine, not because it was threatening, but because it was so painfully vulnerable. The nursery had been housing several specimens of Villani cubs, young creatures they'd rescued from a destroyed habitat during their survey missions. The Villani were herbivorous, resembling a cross between Earth's deer and lemurs, with large expressive eyes and soft, pearl-colored fur. The adult Villani had been relocated to a protected reserve on the planet's northern continent weeks ago, but the cubs were too young to make the journey. Sarah's stomach dropped as she realized what the evacuation protocol meant. In their rush to escape the Kithara assault, the research team had forgotten about the cubs. The nursery's life support systems were automated, but if the Kithara breached the station's main power grid, those innocent creatures would be left defenseless. She changed direction, running toward the nursery section despite every survival instinct screaming at her to reach the evacuation pods. The corridors grew darker as she moved deeper into the station, emergency lighting casting eerie red shadows on the walls. The Kithara's hunting calls grew louder, a haunting harmony that spoke of ancient predatory traditions. The nursery door stood slightly ajar, and Sarah could see the blue glow of the habitat enclosures within. She pushed inside and found 6 Villani cubs huddled together in the largest enclosure, their large eyes reflecting the emergency lights. They looked up at her with complete trust, unaware that death was prowling just outside the station walls. "It's okay, little ones," Sarah whispered, opening the enclosure. The cubs immediately clustered around her legs, their soft fur warm against her skin. They made gentle, chirping sounds, seeking comfort from the only familiar presence they knew. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but Sarah knew the station's defenses had failed. The Kithara would be inside within minutes, following their incredible sense of smell and hearing. The evacuation pods would be long gone by now, carrying the rest of the crew to safety aboard the orbiting research vessel. She gathered the cubs close, her mind racing through options. The service tunnels might offer a way out, but they were too narrow for the cubs to move quickly. The main corridors would be death traps once the Kithara entered the station. The emergency bunker was heavily reinforced, but it was on the other side of the complex. A sound echoed through the station that made Sarah's blood freeze. It was the unmistakable screech of metal being torn apart, followed by the triumphant roars of the Kithara pack. They were inside. Heavy footsteps began moving through the corridors, accompanied by the click of claws on metal flooring. The pack was spreading out, systematically searching the station. Sarah could hear them calling to each other in their complex hunting language, coordinating their sweep with military precision. She looked down at the 6 cubs pressed against her legs, their small bodies trembling with instinctive fear. These creatures represented months of careful study, but more than that, they were innocent lives depending on her protection. The rational choice was to hide and hope the Kithara passed by. The human choice was something else entirely. Sarah Chun had never considered herself particularly brave. She was a scientist, not a soldier. Her expertise lay in understanding alien ecosystems, not fighting for survival against apex predators. But as she knelt among the frightened cubs, something primal awakened within her. The footsteps were getting closer. Through the nursery's observation window, Sarah caught a glimpse of a Kithara warrior moving past in the corridor beyond. Its scales reflected the emergency lighting like polished obsidian, and she could see the intelligence burning in its predatory gaze. The cubs sensed the approaching danger, pressing closer to Sarah and making barely audible whimpers of fear. Their trust was absolute, their faith in her protection touching something deep in her human soul. Sarah made her choice. Sarah quickly scanned the nursery for anything that could serve as a weapon. The research facility hadn't been designed for combat, but desperation sharpened her thinking. She grabbed a plasma cutter used for geological samples, its energy cell showing half charge. Not much, but it would have to do. The cubs seemed to understand the gravity of their situation with the intuitive wisdom of prey animals. They moved silently, clustering behind Sarah as she positioned herself between them and the nursery entrance. Their large eyes reflected the emergency lighting, watching her with complete faith in her ability to protect them. A shadow passed by the doorway, followed by another. The Kithara were moving in formation, clearing each room methodically. Sarah held her breath, hoping they might pass by the nursery, but she knew better. These predators had evolved to hunt in the dense forests of this world, developing senses far beyond human capability. The first Kithara appeared in the doorway, its massive frame filling the entrance. Up close, Sarah could see the intricate patterns of scars across its dark scales, marks of countless hunts and territorial battles. Its 4 arms ended in claws that could disembowel a large animal with a single swipe. The creature's elongated skull turned slowly as it surveyed the room, yellow eyes finally settling on the small group huddled near the back wall. The predator took a step forward, and Sarah heard herself make a sound she didn't recognize. It came from somewhere deep in her chest, a low growling that seemed to vibrate through her entire body. The Kithara paused, its head tilting slightly as it processed this unexpected response. Sarah raised the plasma cutter, its blue glow casting strange shadows across her face. "Stay back," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. The words were meaningless to the alien predator, but her tone and posture conveyed the message clearly enough. The Kithara made a series of clicking sounds, likely calling for its packmates. 2 more appeared behind it, their combined presence making the nursery feel impossibly small. Sarah could smell their predatory musk, a sharp odor that spoke of successful hunts and fresh kills. One of the cubs behind her made a soft, whimpering sound, and Sarah felt something fundamental shift inside her. The fear that had been paralyzing her transformed into something else entirely. Her ancestors had faced down-cave lions and saber-toothed cats with nothing but sharpened sticks and burning branches. That same primal courage now flooded her system with adrenaline and determination. She stepped forward, placing herself directly between the predators and their intended prey. The plasma cutter hummed in her hands, its energy beam ready to slice through whatever threatened the cubs under her protection. The lead Kythera studied her with obvious intelligence, its predatory mind calculating threats and opportunities. It had probably never encountered a human before, but it recognized the protective stance of a guardian defending its young. This was a scenario it understood, even if the species involved were alien to it. Sarah began to move slowly sideways, keeping herself between the predators and the cubs while gradually working toward the nursery's secondary exit. The cubs followed her movement perfectly, their herd instincts allowing them to move as one coordinated group. Their small hooves made no sound on the metal flooring. The Kythera pack adjusted their position to match hers, but they didn't attack immediately. These were intelligent hunters who preferred to separate their prey from any protection before striking. They seemed puzzled by this small alien creature's refusal to flee or submit. Sarah's back touched the wall near the emergency exit, and she reached behind her to activate the door controls. Nothing happened. The power failure had locked down all non-essential systems, including the secondary exits. They were trapped. The lead Kythera seemed to sense her realization, its lips pulling back to reveal those crystal teeth in what might have been a predatory smile. It took another step forward, and its packmates spread out to flank the small group. That's when Sarah did something that would be remembered in human history for generations to come. Instead of retreating or cowering, she stepped forward to meet the approaching predator. The plasma cutter blazed to life in her hands, its energy beam casting blue fire across the dark scales of the Kythera leader. The alien predator recoiled, more from surprise than pain. The energy beam had left a smoking mark across its shoulder, the first wound it had received from prey in many hunts. Its yellow eyes fixed on Sarah with new respect and wariness. Sarah pressed her advantage, advancing another step while keeping the cubs behind her. She was vastly outmatched in size and strength, but humans had evolved their own hunting advantages: intelligence, adaptability, and something the Kythera had perhaps never encountered before: the willingness to fight hopeless battles to protect others. "Come on then," Sarah growled, her voice carrying a challenge that transcended species barriers. "You want them, you go through me first." The Kythera exchanged rapid clicking communications, their hunting formation beginning to shift. They were adapting to this unexpected resistance, but Sarah could see uncertainty in their movements. Their prey was supposed to run or submit, not bare its teeth and advance with weapons blazing. The plasma cutter's energy cell displayed a warning light. She had perhaps 30 seconds of charge remaining, and after that, she would face 3 apex predators with nothing but her bare hands and human determination. One of the cubs behind her made a soft chirping sound, and Sarah felt a gentle touch against her leg. She glanced down to see the youngest cub looking up at her with absolute trust. In that moment, she understood something fundamental about what it meant to be human. Humans weren't the strongest species in the galaxy, or the fastest, or the most naturally armed. But they had evolved something else, something that had carried them from the plains of Africa to the stars themselves. They had evolved the capacity to care for others even at the cost of their own survival. The Kythera leader tensed for its attack, muscles coiling beneath its armored scales. Its pack mates positioned themselves for a coordinated strike that would overwhelm even the most determined defender. Sarah raised the plasma cutter, its blue glow reflecting in her determined eyes. Behind her, 6 young lives depended on her courage. Around her, alien predators prepared to claim their prey. The battle was about to begin. The lead Kythera launched itself forward with devastating speed, its 4 arms spread wide to prevent any escape. Sarah dove to one side, the plasma cutter's beam slicing across the predator's chest as she rolled. The alien's roar of pain and rage filled the nursery, a sound that spoke of ancient hunts and primal fury. The cubs scattered behind overturned equipment, their survival instincts finally overriding their trust in Sarah's protection. She was glad for their wisdom. even as it left her alone to face the pack's concentrated fury. The second Kythera flanked her from the right, its claws extended for a killing strike. Sarah spun and fired the plasma cutter again, the energy beam burning across the creature's forearm. The weapon's charge indicator dropped to critical levels, warning lights flashing red in the emergency lighting. Sarah's mind raced through her options as she backed against a bank of monitoring equipment. The plasma cutter had maybe one more shot, and then she would be facing 3 enraged predators with nothing but improvised weapons and human stubbornness. The wounded Kythera leader circled her slowly, yellow eyes burning with predatory intelligence. It was learning from each exchange, understanding that this small alien possessed weapons capable of causing real harm. Its packmates moved to cut off any escape routes, their coordination speaking of countless successful hunts. Sarah grabbed a metal chair and hurled it at the nearest predator, the impact barely registering on its armored scales. But the gesture served its purpose, buying her seconds to reach the equipment storage area. Her hands closed around a container of liquid nitrogen used for specimen preservation. The Kythera leader struck again, this time feinting left before attacking from the right. Sarah barely avoided the swipe of its claws, the razor-sharp appendages leaving deep gouges in the metal wall where her head had been. She triggered the liquid nitrogen dispenser, sending a cloud of freezing vapor directly into the creature's face. The alien predator recoiled with a shriek of pain, its exposed membranes around the eyes and nasal passages burning from the intense cold. Sarah pressed her advantage, advancing with the plasma cutter raised for one final shot. But the other 2 Kythera had flanked her completely. As she focused on their wounded leader, they attacked from both sides simultaneously. Sarah knew she couldn't avoid them both, and in that split second, she made another choice that defined her humanity. Instead of diving away from the attacks, she threw herself forward toward the leader, placing herself between the flanking predators and the hiding places where the cubs had taken shelter. The claws meant for her back instead raked across her shoulder and side, tearing through her research jacket and drawing deep lines of fire across her skin. Sarah screamed, not just from pain, but from rage and defiance that reached back to humanity's earliest struggles for survival. She jammed the plasma cutter against the leader's wounded chest and pulled the trigger, emptying the weapon's remaining charge directly into the creature's body. The Kythera leader staggered backward, its dark scales smoking from the energy discharge. For a moment, the predator's yellow eyes met Sarah's, and she saw something unexpected there. Not just pain or anger, but recognition. This alien hunter had encountered something it hadn't expected to find in its prey: the willingness to die, fighting rather than submit to death. The plasma cutter died in Sarah's hands, its energy cell completely drained. She dropped the useless weapon and faced the 3 predators with nothing but her bleeding hands and unbreakable determination. The Kythera pack began to close in for the final kill. That's when the cubs did something that surprised everyone in the room, including Sarah. The youngest cub, the one that had touched her leg with such trust, emerged from its hiding place. Its large eyes met Sarah's for a moment, and then it did something unprecedented in its species' evolutionary history. Instead of fleeing from the predators that had killed its kind for millions of years, it positioned itself beside Sarah and made the closest approximation to a growl that its herbivorous throat could produce. The other cubs followed suit, one by one emerging from their hiding spots to stand with their protector. They were small and defenseless, their only weapons tiny hooves and determination borrowed from the human who had refused to abandon them. But they stood together, facing certain death rather than watching their guardian fall alone. The Kythera pack stopped their advance, clearly puzzled by this unprecedented behavior. In their long evolutionary history, prey animals had always followed predictable patterns: flee, hide, or submit to death. They had never encountered prey that chose to fight alongside a protector, even when that fight was hopeless. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she looked down at the 6 cubs standing beside her. These creatures had learned something from watching her that went against every survival instinct their species possessed. They had learned about loyalty, about courage, about the choice to stand together even when standing meant dying. The lead Kithra took another step forward, but its movement was hesitant now. The wound in its chest was serious, and the strange behavior of its intended prey had disrupted the pack's hunting rhythm. It made a series of rapid clicking sounds to its pack mates, and Sarah could hear uncertainty in their response. She wiped the blood from her wounded shoulder and spoke to the predators in a voice that carried across species lines. "You can kill us," she said quietly, "but you'll never make us run. You'll never make us abandon each other. That's what makes us different from you." The words meant nothing to the Kithra, but Sarah's tone and posture communicated something they could understand. This was not prey. This was something else entirely, something their predatory instincts couldn't quite categorize. The injured leader raised one of its 4 arms for the killing strike, claws extended to end this strange confrontation. The cubs pressed closer to Sarah's legs, their small bodies trembling but refusing to flee. Sarah closed her eyes and waited for death, content in the knowledge that she had chosen to face it with courage and compassion. The blow never came. Instead, Sarah heard the sound that would haunt her dreams and inspire her hope for the rest of her life. It was the roar of human engines, growing louder by the second. The evacuation ship had returned, bringing with it something the Kithra had never faced before, humans who had come back for their own. Emergency flares began exploding outside the station, filling the corridors with blinding white light. The sound of heavy weapons fire echoed through the complex as the rescue team began their assault on the Kithra pack that had invaded the station. The 3 predators in the nursery exchanged rapid communications, their hunting instincts now overridden by survival concerns. They had expected easy prey, not a battle against armed and organized opponents. Sarah opened her eyes to see the Kithra leader backing toward the nursery's main entrance, its yellow gaze still fixed on her with something that might have been respect. The pack had decided that this particular hunt had become more dangerous than profitable. But they weren't done with her yet. As the predators retreated toward the corridors, the leader paused at the doorway and made a sound Sarah had never heard before. It was softer than their usual hunting calls, more complex than their pack communications. It sounded almost like a promise. The Kithra melted into the shadows of the station's corridors, their retreat as coordinated as their attack had been. But Sarah knew this wasn't over. The pack had marked her scent, learned her fighting patterns, and, most importantly, they had been challenged by prey that refused to submit. In the predatory culture of the Kithra, such challenges demanded answers. The rescue team reached the nursery 12 minutes later, their plasma rifles trained on empty shadows and echoing spaces. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the expedition's security chief, found Sarah sitting against the wall with the 6 cubs clustered around her like a protective circle. Blood from her shoulder wound had soaked through her torn jacket, but her eyes were alert and determined. "Dr. Chin, are you injured?" Webb's scanner swept the room for hostile life signs while Medic Torres began examining Sarah's wounds. The cubs remained close to her, unwilling to trust these new humans despite their obvious intent to help. "I'm fine," Sarah said, though her voice carried the tremor of adrenaline aftermath. "The cubs are unharmed. The Kithra pack retreated when you arrived, but they'll be back. This isn't over." Webb's experienced eyes took in the scene. The damaged equipment, the claw marks in the walls, the improvised weapons scattered across the floor. He had seen the aftermath of Kithra attacks before, and survivors were rare. Survivors who had protected others were unheard of. "Ma'am, we need to evacuate immediately," he said. "The pack has regrouped in the eastern corridor. They're not fleeing the station, they're hunting us." Sarah struggled to her feet, the cubs moving with her in perfect coordination. During their shared ordeal, she had somehow become part of their herd structure, the protective leader they would follow anywhere. How many Kithra are there?" "Our sensors show at least 12, possibly more." Webb replied grimly. They've cut off the main route to the landing bay. We're going to have to fight our way out. As they moved through the station's corridors, Sarah began to understand the true scope of the situation. The Kithara hadn't simply attacked the research facility. They had laid siege to it. The pack was using coordinated tactics that suggested military-level intelligence, cutting off escape routes, and forcing the humans into defensive positions. The rescue team consisted of 8 heavily armed Marines, but they were facing an unknown number of apex predators on their home territory. The Kithara knew every corridor, every hiding place, every tactical advantage the station offered. Dr. Chun, Webb said as they paused at a junction, why didn't the pack kill you when they had the chance? Our briefings indicated they never leave prey alive. Sarah looked down at the cubs pressed against her legs, their trust absolute despite the danger surrounding them. I think they don't understand what they encountered. Prey that fights back, that protects others, it doesn't fit their hunting patterns. A sound echoed through the corridor ahead, the clicking communication of Kithara pack hunters. Webb raised his hand, signaling for silence, and checked his rifle's charge. The Marines spread into defensive formation, but Sarah could see the concern in their movements. They were outnumbered and fighting on enemy ground. There's something else, Sarah said quietly. The pack leader, the one I wounded, I think it marked me. This has become personal for it. Webb's expression darkened. Marked you how? The Kithara have complex social structures based on dominance and challenge. By fighting back, by protecting the cubs, I challenged its authority as an apex predator. In their culture, such challenges must be answered. The clicking sounds grew closer, accompanied by the soft pad of clawed feet on metal flooring. The Kithara were moving through the ventilation shafts, using routes too small for humans, but perfect for their compact, muscular frames. We need to reach the landing bay, Webb said. Can you move with those wounds? Sarah nodded, though the gashes across her shoulder burned with every movement. The cubs sensed her pain and pressed closer, offering what comfort they could. Their behavior continued to amaze her. In the space of an hour, they had learned to overcome millions of years of evolutionary programming. The group began moving through the corridors, but they had only made it 50 meters when the first Kithara appeared. It dropped from a ventilation grate directly behind them, landing in perfect silence despite its massive frame. The predator's yellow eyes fixed immediately on Sarah, confirming her suspicions about being marked. Webb spun and fired his plasma rifle in one fluid motion, the energy beam striking the Kithara center mass. The alien predator staggered, but didn't fall, its natural armor absorbing much of the blast's energy. It roared in pain and rage, the sound echoing through the corridor like a war cry. More Kithara appeared, emerging from hidden positions with coordinated precision. The Marines formed a protective circle around Sarah, and the cubs, their weapons creating a barrier of plasma fire. But Sarah could see they were being surrounded, just as she had been in the nursery. This is exactly what happened before, she realized. They're using the same hunting pattern. Drive the prey into a confined space, cut off escape routes, then attack from all sides. Webb's tactical training recognized the truth in her words. Suggestions, Doctor? Sarah looked around the corridor, her xenobiologist's mind analyzing the situation from the predator's perspective. The Kithara were apex hunters, but they were also intelligent enough to adapt their strategies. However, their adaptation was based on understanding prey behavior patterns. We don't act like prey, Sarah said suddenly. Every species they hunt follows predictable patterns when cornered. Flee, hide, or submit. We do something else. What do you have in mind? Sarah picked up one of the cubs, cradling the small creature against her uninjured side. The other cubs clustered around her feet, their large eyes reflecting the plasma fire that lit the corridor. We attack them. Webb's eyes widened. Ma'am, with respect, that's suicide. We're outnumbered 3-1. No, Sarah said firmly, her voice carrying new confidence. We're not outnumbered. We're different. Humans don't just protect their own, they protect others, even when it means sacrificing tactical advantages. She stepped forward, moving beyond the protective circle of Marines. The Kithara pack tensed, expecting her to flee or cower. Instead, she walked directly toward the pack leader, the wounded alpha that had marked her as its personal challenge. "I know you understand this," Sarah called to the creature. "You're intelligent enough to recognize what happened in that nursery. I chose to protect them instead of saving myself. That's not prey behavior. That's something else entirely." The pack leader tilted its elongated skull, yellow eyes studying Sarah with obvious intelligence. It made a series of complex clicking sounds to its pack mates, and their formation began to shift. They were still surrounding the human group, but their posture had changed from attack-ready to watchful. Sarah continued walking forward until she was within striking range of the pack leader's claws. The cubs followed her, maintaining their formation around her legs despite their terror. The Marines called out warnings, but she ignored them. "You want to hunt me?" Sarah asked the predator. "Then hunt me. But you'll find that humans don't die the way your usual prey does. We don't just give up. We don't just submit. And we never, ever abandon those under our protection." The Kithara leader studied her for a long moment, its predatory mind processing this unprecedented situation. In its world, prey that challenged predators was eliminated quickly and efficiently. But this challenge was different. This wasn't territorial aggression or mating competition. This was something its species had never encountered. The alien predator slowly raised one of its four arms, claws extended for a killing strike. Sarah didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't break eye contact. Behind her, she could hear the Marines preparing to open fire, but she knew that conventional tactics wouldn't save them here. The Kithara's claw stopped inches from Sarah's throat. The pack leader made a sound unlike any she had heard before, softer, but somehow more complex than their usual communications. It sounded almost like recognition. The predator stepped back, lowering its arm. It spoke again in that strange new tone, addressing not just its pack, but something beyond them. Then, without warning, the entire pack began to retreat, melting into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. Webb kept his rifle trained on the empty corridor for several minutes after the last Kithara disappeared. "Dr. Chun, what just happened?" Sarah sank to her knees, exhaustion and relief flooding through her system. The cubs immediately surrounded her, offering comfort with their gentle presence. "I think," she said quietly, "we just taught them something new about what it means to be intelligent life in this universe." But even as she spoke, Sarah knew this encounter was far from over. The Kithara pack leader had marked her, and among intelligent predators, such marks were not easily forgotten. They would meet again, and next time, the stakes would be even higher. 3 months later, Dr. Sarah Chun stood before the Galactic Research Council on Luna Station, her report on the Kepler 442b incident having sent shockwaves through the xenological community. The 6 Volani cubs, now healthy and thriving, had become symbols of interspecies cooperation throughout human space. But Sarah's mind wasn't on fame or recognition. It was on the message that had arrived that morning through channels she didn't know existed until recently. Dr. Chun, Counselor Voss, was saying, his tentacles gesticulating with typical Altarian emphasis, "Your actions on Kepler 442b represent a paradigm shift in predator-prey dynamics." However, some members question whether your anthropocentric interpretation of events is accurate. Sarah nodded respectfully. "Counselor, I understand the skepticism. What happened defies standard xenobiological models. But the evidence speaks for itself." She activated the holographic display, showing recordings from the station's emergency systems. The images were grainy, but they clearly showed the final confrontation between Sarah and the Kithara pack leader. "The Kithara demonstrated behavior patterns never before recorded," Sarah continued. "Tactical withdrawal in the face of inferior force, recognition of non-aggressive challenge, and, most importantly, acknowledgement of protective behavior as a non-prey characteristic." Counselor Zhang, representing the Human Colonial Authority, leaned forward. "Dr. Chun, there are reports that you've received unusual communications since the incident. Would you care to elaborate?" Sarah hesitated, then activated a secure data channel. A complex pattern of sounds filled the council chamber, haunting and beautiful in their mathematical precision. The alien music spoke of vast forests and ancient hunts, of pack bonds and territorial claims. This message was transmitted to every human monitoring station in this sector, Sarah said. Our linguistic analysis teams believe it's a formal challenge issued according to Kithera cultural protocols. They're requesting a meeting. The council chamber erupted in whispered conversations across multiple species. The implications were staggering. The Kithera were not just intelligent predators. They were a sophisticated culture capable of interstellar communication and complex diplomatic protocols. Dr. Chun, Counselor Voss spoke again, his bioluminescent patches flickering with concern. You understand that accepting such a challenge could establish precedent for human-Kithera relations throughout this sector. The decision affects more than just your personal situation. Sarah looked at the small habitat where the 6 cubs were playing, their pearl-colored fur gleaming under the artificial light. They had learned to trust not just her, but other humans as well. Their transformation from terrified refugees to confident young beings represented something unprecedented in galactic history. I've made my decision, Sarah said firmly. I'm returning to Kepler, 442b, to meet their representative. The council chamber fell silent. Even the cubs stopped playing, their large eyes turned towards Sarah with understanding beyond their apparent years. Dr. Chun, Counselor Zhang said carefully, our military advisors strongly recommend against this course of action. The Kithera homeworld has been classified as extremely hostile to human life. I'm not going to their homeworld, Sarah replied. They're coming to ours. The meeting is scheduled for next week at the original research station site. She activated another hologram, this one showing recent orbital scans of Kepler, 442b. A massive Kithera vessel had taken position in the planet's upper atmosphere, its biomechanical design unlike anything in the galactic databases. They sent a ship? Counselor Voss's patches flashed rapidly with alarm. Not just a ship, Sarah corrected. A cultural delegation. Our xenolinguistic teams have identified at least 17 distinct communication patterns in their transmissions. This isn't a hunting pack. It's a diplomatic mission. She paused, gathering her thoughts for what she knew would be the most important statement of her career. The Kithera have recognized humans as something they've never encountered before, intelligent life that protects other species without territorial or reproductive motivation. They want to understand what that means. The youngest of the cubs, the one that had first stood beside her in the nursery, chirped softly and approached the council platform. Without hesitation, it climbed into Sarah's arms and settled against her shoulder, offering comfort through its simple presence. This is why I have to go, Sarah continued, her voice strengthened by the cubs' trust. 3 months ago, these cubs learned that sometimes the strong protect the weak just because it's right. The Kithera learned the same lesson. If we don't follow through, if we don't meet with them as equals, we lose the chance to establish the first truly ethical interspecies relationship in galactic history. Counselor Zhang activated his private communication channel, conferring rapidly with unseen advisors. When he emerged from the consultation, his expression was troubled but resigned. Dr. Chun, the Colonial Authority will provide full diplomatic support for this mission. However, you should know that our xenological experts give this encounter only a 30% chance of peaceful resolution. Sarah smiled, her fingers gently stroking the cub's soft fur. Counselor, 3 months ago, I had 0% chance of surviving an encounter with a Kithera pack. Sometimes the impossible becomes possible when you're willing to stand for something bigger than yourself. 1 week later, Sarah stood in the rebuilt nursery of Research Station Kepler, 442b, watching through reinforced windows as the Kithera delegation ship descended through the planet's atmosphere. The vessel was beautiful in its alien design. Organic curves merged seamlessly with crystalline structures that caught and refracted the system's light. The 6 cubs, now grown large enough to accompany her safely, pressed against her legs in their familiar formation. They had insisted on coming, their bond with Sarah transcending species barriers in ways that continued to amaze the xenobiological community. Lieutenant Webb stood nearby with a small security detail, but their weapons were ceremonially powered down. This meeting would succeed or fail based on trust, not firepower. Dr. Chun, Webb said quietly, the ship is landing. Our scanners show 3 life forms aboard, all Kithera. One of them matches the biosignature of the pack leader you encountered. Sarah nodded, her heart racing with anticipation and carefully controlled fear. The next few hours would determine whether humanity's capacity for protective compassion could bridge the gap between predator and prey, between ancient hunting traditions and new possibilities. The Kithera ship touched down with surprising grace, its biomechanical systems interfacing directly with the planet's ecosystem. As Sarah watched, the ship's hull began to change, sections becoming transparent to reveal the delegation inside. The pack leader, she remembered, emerged first, its dark scales bearing new markings that suggested elevated status within Kithera society. Behind it came 2 other individuals, their postures and coloration indicating roles she could only guess at. Diplomat, perhaps. Cultural advisor. Maybe even something analogous to a priest. The delegation approached the station slowly, their movements careful and non-threatening. When they reached the entrance, the pack leader made a sound unlike any Sarah had heard before. It was musical, complex, and somehow conveyed both strength and respect. Sarah took a deep breath, the cubs clustering closer around her legs. She was about to become the first human to engage in formal diplomacy with a species of apex predators. The outcome would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. "Let them in," she said quietly. As the station's airlocks cycled open, Sarah found herself face to face with the Kithera leader once again. But this time, instead of predatory hunger, she saw something else in those yellow eyes. Recognition, respect, and, perhaps most remarkably, curiosity about what this small alien creature might teach them about the nature of strength. The conversation that followed would become legend throughout human space. 2 species, separated by evolution and instinct, finding common ground in the simple recognition that intelligence carried with it the responsibility to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The cubs, no longer hiding in fear, approached the towering predators with the confidence of beings who had learned that sometimes the strongest warriors were also the gentlest guardians. And in that moment, watching herbivore cubs fearlessly greet apex predators, Sarah knew that the universe had become a little less wild and a little more wonderful. The age of true interspecies cooperation had begun, founded not on treaties or trade agreements, but on the simple human choice to shield the innocent and snarl in defiance at those who would harm them. It was perhaps the most human thing possible, to stand between predators and prey and somehow transform both into something greater than either could be alone.